Hi folks, Dom Lawson here from Metal Hammer Magazine with another Iron Sandwich thing. Is it a podcast? I don't know. Is it a vodcast? I don't accept the term, frankly. Is it a man talking into a laptop and pretty much not contributing anything to mankind, really? Is it that? I suspect it might be. Anyway, today I'm going to talk to you about a very, very fucking brilliant record. And I'm going to sniff as well, because I've got a bit of a cold. But before I do that, I'm going to... This will all link together seamlessly, it'll be brilliant. Before I do that, I'm going to big up my friend's forthcoming tour. My friend Sarah Jezebel Diva, who many of you will know as former singer with Cradle of Filth and Therion, among others, has had has a solo career ongoing and has a rather brilliant band, frankly, backing her up. And I guess it's one of those situations where the band is called Sarah Jezebel Diva. But anyway, point being, she's got a UK tour coming up. And I feel that Sarah is one of those people that doesn't get the credit she deserves for the quality of her music and the things that she's done since, since going it alone, or since being apart from the bands that she's most obviously associated with. And so I'm using this as an opportunity to plug her tour, and I don't see any reason why not, because her band are killer. The album Corruption and Mercy that came out last year was really good. It's a strong record. I didn't like the cover of Zombie by the Cranberries, but I've already told Sarah that, so she's not going to get upset. I just don't like that song. There you go. But anyway, so the dates for the tour I would thoroughly recommend you go and see them, because it's going to be killer. And it's one of those things people seem to pick and choose. They say, "Oh, I support the British metal scene," but then they kind of pick and choose the parts of it that they think are worthy of supporting. Well, you should support people that are out there, working their bollocks off to try and get somewhere. And most of these venues, these are small venues that it's not going to cost you £1 million to get in, and it'll be a good night out, and you'll get to hear Sarah's amazing voice. So, what more could you ask for, really, apart from beer? And they sell beer. So May the 16th, the band are playing The End in Birmingham. The 17th, the Dry Bar in Manchester. The 18th, the Lomax in Liverpool. The 19th, the Cockpit in Leeds. The 20th, Yardbirds in Grimsby. The 23rd, Bogies in Cardiff. Interesting choice of name for a venue, but anyway. The 24th, Tunnels in Bristol. 25th, the George in Andover. They were playing in Brighton on the 26th, but annoyingly it's been cancelled. And on May the 27th, they'll be playing at Nambucca in that London, the Big Smoke there. So yeah, please go and check Sarah out, because it's going to be awesome. And check out the album as well. It's killer. But like I say, cheap excuse to plug something by somebody that I get on with extremely well. I think Sarah's awesome and has a fantastic voice, and her band is brilliant. So there you go. That's enough of that bollocks. I'm going to talk to you now about another thing, which I suppose is, talking about people picking and choosing things that they approve of in metal. And I maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm a total dickhead. It's almost inevitable, really. But I kind of think that if you're going to support the metal scene, then you should support it in its entirety. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to like everything. You don't have to like all the music and all the bands and all the rest of it, because we all have, wildly differing tastes, and that goes without saying, really. But I think, a lot of the internet has kind of given people the impression that you can bicker and argue about really pointless details about how one subgenre is better than another, and how one band is a bunch of fags but another band that essentially look and sound exactly like them aren't. And I just find it all immensely tedious, really. I think if you're a heavy metal fan, then you should, it's us and them, us being heavy metal fans, them being people who aren't heavy metal fans, not other heavy metal fans. That seems a bit retarded to me to pick on that. But anyway, one particular bugbear that I have is this kind of rather childish elitism that a lot of people of my generation seem to be hooked on, really, in that people are very approving of bands that look and sound like the old days. Bands that stick rigidly to a kind of an aesthetic, presentation that is basically rooted in the early 80s. Bands that dress a certain way because bands in the early 80s dress like that. Bands that only have the kind of production that you had back then, rather than embracing new technology to have an actual, a sonically more powerful production. Bands that are essentially retro bands, but which are, kind of decreed by these kind of elitist posers, as far. I think they're posers anyway. I mean, that's a moot point, really. But that it's real metal, true metal, and all this kind of stuff, and that somehow bands that have a modern production and incorporate influences that from the kind of Pantera era onwards are somehow not real metal. Well, that's just bollocks, frankly, and I'm a bit bored with it, really. And one band that are consistently on the receiving end of that kind of cynicism and kind of sneering, I'm more cool than you, and I'm a true metal fan, and I've got loads of patches on my cut-off denim jacket, all that bollocks. It's 3 Inches of Blood. Now, 3 Inches of Blood got an unfair rep very early on when their first album came out. There were several reasons for that. One reason for that was that they were on the same label in the UK as The Darkness, and obviously people were hurling accusations at The Darkness of it's all ironic and they're taking the piss out of rock and metal, which was bollocks and untrue about them as well. But you could see how that would then transfer to other bands that were on that label, guilt by association and all that kind of stuff. And 3 Inches of Blood, some members of the band were obviously had previously been in hardcore bands, God forbid, how terrible, ended up being accused of not being the real deal, of not being sincere about their love of heavy metal, and of being a piss take, of being, somehow mocking traditional heavy metal and kind of doing a pastiche of it. Well, that was bollocks at the time, and it's still bollocks now. I mean, I think you have to actually meet people and speak to them individually to really find out where their motivations lie. And I've interviewed 3 Inches of Blood, various members of 3 Inches of Blood over the years, and I've found them to be very knowledgeable and very sincere about their love of heavy metal, and increasingly as the band has progressed, their music has reflected that. I think they've got better at it. Like most bands, they started off, kind of there or thereabouts, but then they've improved as they've toured and become better songwriters. I think the cynicism that's aimed towards them is frankly ludicrous. And I think if a band sounds like a heavy metal band and does all the things that a heavy metal band does, and has a singer that sounds like Rob Halford or King Diamond or one of those kind of things, to automatically assume that they're insincere because they don't come from your particular part of the scene, or because they have a modern production, or because they're signed to Roadrunner, or because any number of reasons that really have very little to do with what their music actually sounds like, is just childish and really just a smokescreen for you saying, "Oh, I'm incredibly cool." And I own lots of obscure 7 inches and demos. Well, whatever. No one cares, mate, to be honest. It's no substitute for a girlfriend, is it? But anyway, the point being, 3 Inches of Blood have got a brand new album out on Century Media Records. I'm not sure if it's out this week or next week, but it's out soon. And it's called Long Live Heavy Metal. Now, you've got to have balls of a fairly impressive size to release an album called Long Live Heavy Metal, particularly given some of the cynicism that's aimed towards this band. But I suspect that most of that cynicism occurs in this country and probably nowhere else. I don't imagine they face any of the kind of criticism in America that they do here. But anyway, it's their is it their 5th album or their 6th album, something like that. And they've been bashing them out, bless them. And this one, I just think, out of all the records I've heard this year, I wouldn't say it's my number one album of the year at this point. It's certainly top 5. To me, this is one of the best pure heavy metal albums I've heard in a very, very long time. It ticks the same boxes for me that Accept's Blood of the Nations did in many ways, in that songwriting-wise, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. They're just brilliant heavy metal songs. Production-wise, it's modern. It's crushing. It's really, really heavy, but not in a way that detracts from the character of the band. It's not a kind of carbon copy Andy Sneap production. A lot of the people who just try and copy what Andy does. It's not just a Pro Tools kind of identikit thing. It still sounds like 3 Inches of Blood, but it really rattles along at a brutal pace, this record. And the choruses and the melodies and the lead breaks and the harmonies and the drums and everything about it is just absolutely fucking brilliant. I think none of their albums in the past have been masterpieces. I don't think they've always had great songs on, Deadly Sinners and all that kind of stuff. There've always been some cracking songs on 3 Inches of Blood records. But this one, every single track without exception, and I rarely say that, is an absolute belter. Some of the ones that spring to mind, you may have already heard "Metal Woman," which is the opening track on the album. That's the one that's been released as a MP3, or it's the one that's out on sampler CDs and whatever. "Metal Woman," brilliant song. There is an element of humour in the lyrics of 3 Inches of Blood, but there is in a lot of bands that are awesome and that don't receive the same criticism. So, a lot of these retro bands are actually more tongue-in-cheek than 3 Inches of Blood in some ways, and also a lot more contrived, but also there's something very, very kind of Painkiller era Priest about a lot of what 3 Inches of Blood are doing. They remind me of Priest a lot. There's elements of Maiden on there, there's elements of Accepts, there's elements of King Diamond. Those are the 4 things that spring to mind the most. It has that modern brutality to it as well, which I think is, gives them a different edge. So yeah, Metal Woman, brilliant track, total anthem. Leather Lord is a blatant Painkiller ripoff, but it's fabulous, really, really great song. My particular favourite track on the album is called 4,000 Torches, which is just an epic kind of galloping thing with just a chorus to absolutely kill for. It's a stunning piece of work. What else is there? I was trying to remember the blooming track titles, because it's one of those things where you listen to it over and over again, but never actually look at what the songs are called. So you do. I mean, I do that because I'm Bone Idol. Yeah, Dark Messenger, that's another fantastic song. Look Out, Look Out is an epic kind of 5.5, 6 minute track. It's fabulous. If you're a Dio fan, you'll know that on 2 of his greatest ever songs, he shouts, "Look out!" And I wonder if that's a tribute to that. I don't know. It should be. I shout "Look Out" on the new Oath album, interestingly enough. But there you go. That wasn't meant as a Dio tribute at all, but I should have kept that quiet, really. There's a fabulous song called "Chief and the Blade," which starts off with a kind of almost like folk metal-y intro, which reminds me of Fintroll and things like that, but then it kicks into another brutal fucking heavy metal song. Cam Pipes' vocals, I think it's one of those things, it's like King Diamond. You're either going to dig what he's doing or you're not. You're either going to like that voice or you're not. And if you don't, then obviously listening to 3 Inches of Blood is going to be a struggle. But for me, it's a great heavy metal falsetto. The idea that he's taking the piss to me just seems bizarre. I don't, why would he be taking the piss for 5 albums and touring extensively, trying to spread the word? They're 100% sincere, and if you disagree, you're wrong. Okay, good. Glad we got that sorted. Just brilliant songs all the way through. There's not a track. My Sword Will Not Sleep. That's fabulous. Leave It on the Ice. Don't know what that's about. It's about leaving something on the ice, presumably. Die for Gold, Upon the Boiling Sea 4. That's a winner. I love it. I think this is a fantastic record. The artwork's great, production's great, songwriting's great, lyrics great. It's a killer heavy metal record, and I've given it a very frothy review for Metal Hammer in the magazine, because I just feel really passionate about things like this. People, the sneering that goes with bands that aren't quite true enough, you just fuck off. Can't I just enjoy heavy metal because I'm a heavy metal fan? Do I have to, check in the rule book? Am I allowed to listen to this particular band? Fuck off, friendless dickheads whining about everything. Just listen to what you want to listen to, and if you don't like it, shut up. Don't slag everybody else off for liking things you don't. That's moronic, in it, really. So there you go, 3 Inches of Blood, long live heavy metal. If you like heavy metal music, and you're not a narrow-minded twat, then I thoroughly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. And just after a few beers, this is one of those albums that just, just want to headbang and act like a complete fool with a big grin on my face. I can't see how that can be a bad thing. But there you go. I don't own every single 7-inch record ever released by Neat Records in the early 80s. It's one of those things. I don't have the credentials to comment on these things at all, so this entire podcast has been just a tissue of drivel. Tissue of drivel? Anyway. Yeah, so, if you're the kind of person that shares my worldview when it comes to metal, then you'll love this album. If you're not, and you think that 3 Inches of Blood are a bunch of fakes and not true enough, then you won't like it at all, and you wouldn't have given it the time of day anyway, so, whatevs. So there you go, that's me waffling for far too long and plugging my friend's tour and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, thanks for watching. Enjoy the sunshine, unless you're a goth. Cheers.